What is whataboutism? On today's Think Share. Hello humans, welcome to the Think Share. My name's Zach. I'm here to bring to what I've been thinking about, sharing about, talking about, reading about, listening to that doesn't belong in math class. If you're new to the channel, I invite you to subscribe. Past 24 hours, I started listening to this book, Extreme Ownership, on Audible. I've been wanting to check this one out for a while because I feel like just by looking at the title, I have a good idea of what it's about. So in terms of leadership, one of the things I think I've come to know in the past 3 or 4 years, a lot through Landmark Education or Landmark Forum, being a good leader is taking ownership. Now, how does that have anything to do with whataboutism? So whataboutism is when someone says, hey, Mr. Watson, you said that you were going to have our test graded by Friday and you did not do that. If I were to say, instead of taking responsibility and addressing the actual question, I were to say, well, what about the history teachers? They don't even deliver things and it takes them a month to do anything. Or if I were to call out some other teacher or administration, I would say, hey, like in the real world, that doesn't happen at all. If I were to say, what about all those things? I am exhibiting whataboutism, which is you are attempting, one, to not take responsibility by saying that other things that are debatably more important or equally as important are not doing the things that I did not do. Not only that, but I'm also just avoiding the question. I think it's appropriate when people are saying, hey, you said you would do this and you haven't. This is getting so silly to talk about because I'm realizing I can't actually think of myself doing it. So it just kind of upsets me that people even use this. But here's what we need to do better. For people that are seeing others using whataboutism to BS their way out of arguments, we need to keep persisting with those questions. So if it's, Mr. Watson, hey, you said you were gonna have grades in by this date. And I say, well, what about the history teachers? And they say, no, you're getting off track. Mr. Watson, you said you were gonna do this. Why did you not do that? You gotta corner people into answering your questions sometime if they start using whataboutism. It just like annoys me that this even exists. Like to think that the people that we elect into these high level positions, I think that if you are an adult, if you are a real leader, you don't exhibit whataboutism. You take responsibility. The reason I brought up that book, Extreme Ownership, is because one of the things Jocko Willink said as a Navy SEAL was that one of the operations that he did wasn't necessarily his fault. Now, he didn't say that. That's my own experience listening to what was going on. But he was trying to put together an explanation for what happened when he had to document what happened. And he said to the crowd, whose fault is it? And he let people answer, and he said, nope, that's not it, that's not it. And at some point he said, no, it's my fault. It's my fault this happened. And the fact is, I feel like there's not enough people in the world saying this. There are not enough people in the world really just taking ownership, extreme ownership of what they say they're gonna do and the missions and the accomplishments and the things that they're up to. Here's what I'll do. I'm trying to put a better foot forward and trying to lead by example. I'm 100% responsible for the students in my classroom learning the math standards that have been promised to them by taking the geometry, algebra 2 courses. So if my students are not getting the knowledge that they were promised, and that's on me. It's not my administration. It's not my department head. I'm going to say this because it's valuable for me to look at. Now, I absolutely invite students to also take a look at where they can own it themselves. But if you can own something fully, you can be a leader. If I'm not owning it fully, if I'm not saying, hey, I'm not fully responsible for my students learning things, then I'm not a leader. I would certainly hope students would also take on for themselves that they can take ownership of their own learning. And I think there's a lot of students out there that absolutely blame the teacher that they don't learn things. And by blaming others, you're not a leader. For the interest of those out there that want to be leaders, what you gotta look at is what are you willing to take ownership over. For all my leaders out there, look for where you can be taking ownership and responsibility where you're not. If you're not taking full ownership, you're not a real leader. I'm not a leader everywhere in my life. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. If you like this, give it a like. If you want more, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell if you want notifications every day come out with something new. Thank you for watching. Stay weird, humans.